Today, you will learn about one of the most disturbing stories ever experienced by an American police force, a simple rescue operation, an experienced SWAT team, and a scenario that seemed like just another routine call. But when they entered that forest, they broke an invisible barrier, a line that should never have been crossed. What seemed like a mission turned into a nightmare of psychological terror, where time, space, and the mind itself began to unravel. If you like true crime stories, with tactical action, mystery, and psychological horror that messes with your mind, you already sign up here at Conflict Route. Here, we go beyond confrontations. We show what no one has the courage to tell, the behind the scenes, the failures, and the dark secrets that surround the operational world. After this video, I guarantee you'll want to know what else happens when the police cross the line into the unknown. Mendocino County, California, 3:17 a.m. The radio of the Central Mendocino County Sheriff's Office exploded with a code that no one wanted to hear at that time of the morning. Unit 14, urgent rescue request. Officer down. Reinforcements immediately. Last location, Hollow Creek Forest. The transmission ended with a distorted hiss, as if someone had pulled the radio out of the socket, or as if something had abruptly cut the power. Inside the headquarters, the operators looked at each other in shock. Hollow Creek was one of those places that police officers avoided patrolling, an isolated region with dense forest, surrounded by local legends about disappearances, a place of strange people, poachers, dark cults, and now, a desperate request coming directly from there. Lieutenant Scott Monroe, an 18-year veteran of the force, was on duty that morning. He had a hard expression, a tired look, but a sense of duty that kept him standing, even after so many cursed missions. Upon hearing the call, he simply said, in a dry voice, "Gather the team, everyone go." In less than 10 minutes, the police station parking lot became a war zone. 7 vehicles, 2 of them with the emblem of Sacramento SWAT, who luckily were training in the region that week, were lined up. Bulletproof vests were being adjusted. Ammunition was being counted. Rifles were being loaded. The atmosphere was tense, heavy, as if everyone felt that this mission went far beyond a simple rescue. Monroe walked up to the SWAT team, led by Sergeant David Kepler, one of California's most respected operators. Kepler was the kind of leader who didn't waver at anything, but at that moment, as he listened to the action plan, his eyes revealed something rare: doubt. A patrol unit went to Hollow Creek to check out an abandoned truck, and now we have 1 officer down and the rest missing, Kepler asked, adjusting his helmet. Who was the team? Monroe responded almost automatically, but with his jaw clenched. Officer Tanner, Officer Ruiz, and Rookie Jenkins. Everyone stopped for a second. About Novato Jenkins, Shad just joined the force. It was his first night patrol. The radio started to crackle again. Central, if anyone hears this, don't come. Please, don't come. The voice, it was Tanner's, but the tone, it was something out of a nightmare. Hoarse, with labored breathing, like he was crying or laughing. It was hard to tell. The silence that followed was deafening. 0350, Hollow Creek Forest entrance. The headlights of the vehicles cut through the dense fog. The smell of wet earth, mixed with the cold of the early morning, created a scene that looked more like a horror film. The SWAT team took the front line, advancing cautiously. Monroe stayed in the rear, coordinating communications, but there was one detail that no one could ignore. The GPS of the vehicles that were there before simply disappeared from the map. No sign, no location, as if they had never been there. Kepler walked up to Monroe before beginning the advance. "Lieutenant, before we go, are you sure it's worth it? Isn't this just another ambush by armed rednecks?" Monroe took a deep breath. "I don't know what it is, but we can't leave our people behind." The team moved forward. Each step into those woods seemed to pull them all into a kind of darkness that wasn't just physical. It was something that messed with their heads. Branches breaking, strange sounds, No animals, no birds, absolute silence. The first abandoned vehicle appeared 500 meters from the entrance, doors open, emergency lights flashing. But the worst was the empty chest. Kepler asked for silence. Everyone surrounded the car. Inside, there were signs of a struggle. Bloodstains on the side. In the back seat, the seatbelt was torn, as if someone had been pulled out with extreme force. One of the SWAT operators, the officer Ramirez, approached the back and pointed to a detail that made everyone freeze. "Gentlemen, look at this. Carved, with something sharp, right on the back seat. One word, run!" Monroe looked around. Kepler ordered everyone to form up, but before they could take the next step, came the scream. A scream coming from the forest. Long, desperate, human, and at the same time, completely inhuman. 0357, Hollow Creek Forest, Ground Zero. The scream was still echoing when silence fell again, but now it was a heavier silence, as if the forest itself had held its breath. Sergeant Kepler gave a hand signal, and the SWAT men automatically fell into sweeping formation. Each man had his weapon in his line of sight, his breathing shallow, his fingers on the trigger. Monroe stood in the rear, his radio in one hand and his flashlight in the other. But what was most frightening wasn't what they heard. It was what didn't listen. No insects, no nocturnal animals, not even the wind. It was as if the forest was frozen in time, a place suspended, still, as if they had crossed an invisible boundary. "Advance in line. Distance of 5 meters between each one," Kepler ordered, his voice low but firm. The group began moving along the narrow trail. Their flashlights flickered as they cut through the thick fog. Each step seemed more difficult than the last, as if the ground was trying to pull them down. Monroe walked right behind Ramirez and Parker, two of the best SWAT operators, but even they were showing signs of nervousness. Suddenly, Ramirez's radio crackled. "Let me out, please, let me out of here." The voice was Jenkins's, the newbie. "Jenkins! Jenkins! This is Lieutenant Monroe, where are you?" Monroe shouted into the radio. Nothing, just the hiss. But then came the second transmission. "It's not me, it's not me, it's not me." The voice was still Jenkins, but now she seemed to be coming out of all directions at once. Kepler spun on his heel. "Stop everything! Form a circle! Someone is trying to play with us." The team set up a security perimeter around a clearing. Their flashlights illuminated what appeared to be strange markings on the ground, like scratches, imperfect circles, and symbols no one recognized. "Sergeant!" Ramirez called, pointing to the forest. Several silhouettes began to appear between the trees. They looked like people, standing still, watching, without moving. Kepler aimed his rifle. Monroe did the same. "Who's there? Show your hands!" Kepler shouted. Nothing. The silhouettes remained there, motionless, like frozen human shadows. "Advance 2 steps, everyone together, now!" Kepler ordered. When they took the first step, the silhouettes disappeared, as if they had never existed. Parker, who was on the right corner of the formation, began to tremble. I saw my wife there," he murmured, his eyes wide. "What?" Monroe turned. She was there, in the middle of the forest. She looked at me and smiled." Parker began to breathe quickly. "But my wife died 3 years ago, before anyone could react." Monroe's radio exploded into static, followed by a strange transmission. It was a mix of voices, screams, police orders, cries, laughter, all at the same time, as if someone had recorded hours of human suffering and put it on loop. "Cut it out!" Kepler ordered. Monroe turned off the radio, but the static continued, coming out of all the vehicles around, even those that were out of battery. The team began to collapse psychologically. Every man there, no matter how trained, began to feel like he had crossed an invisible line. Kepler breathed quickly, trying to maintain rationality. "Monroe, we need to get out of here now." Monroe looked around. "Leave, and leave our people." Kepler pointed at the men. Parker, in a cold sweat. Ramirez with his hands shaking, two other operators with glassy eyes as if they were about to lose their minds. If people continue, we're going to lose everyone. It was at that moment that a metallic sound cut through the air, like chains, being dragged, echoing from the northern direction of the forest. Ramirez turned his body, lighting the path, and what he saw made everyone freeze. On the floor, there were human footprints, but they were the size of children's feet, and they were fresh. The detail, the footprints went towards the group, and they ended right behind Ramirez. But when everyone looked, there was no one there. But Ramirez fell to his knees with his hands on his face, crying. "He's behind me. He's here. He's breathing down my neck," she whispered between sobs. Kepler pulled Ramirez by the vest and shouted, "Get up, now! Everyone on the march! Let's get out of this forest! Retreat to the perimeter!" The group began to retreat, but as they ran, they noticed something that made their blood run cold. They ran, and the path remained the same. At every turn, the same fallen tree, the same stone, the same mossy trunk, as if they were walking in circles, even though they were following a straight line. Monroe stopped. He turned around. He looked at Kepler. "That isn't possible." Kepler was pale. "Someone, or something, is messing with us." That's when the final blow came, when they finally broke through the vegetation, back on the road. They were all exhausted, desperate, but when they looked around, the vehicles were no longer there. No tire tracks, no headlights, no sign that they had driven there, just dirt and forest on both sides, as if they had never been there. 423, Hollow Creek Forest, Rupture Zone. The dirt floor seemed to stretch out in every direction like a maze without walls. The police cars were gone. The tire tracks were erased. Even the footprints were gone. Kepler was the first to break the silence. "That is impossible." He spun around, trying to find any sort of location marker. Monroe opened the handheld GPS, but the screen only showed a black background with a single word flashing in red. "Out of range." Ramirez, still in shock, was shaking as he leaned against a tree. Parker was pacing back and forth, mumbling incoherently, his eyes glazed over. Monroe took a deep breath, trying to find logic amidst the chaos. "Kepler, you've been in extreme situations, ambushes, shootings, suicide missions, but tell me, have you ever seen any shit like this?" Kepler clenched his fist. He hated to admit it, but he couldn't find an explanation. Never. It was then that the sound of the radios started again, but this time with something different. There was no static, no human voices. It was a recording of footsteps, running footsteps, as if someone was running desperately straight towards them. The sound got louder, closer, more real, but when everyone pointed their guns, the sound stopped. Kepler kicked the ground in anger. "This is sound manipulation. Someone is messing with our heads," he shouted. Monroe looked around, analyzing every inch of the forest, but deep down, something inside him already knew. It was not a common enemy. It was then that Ramirez began to scream. "My God, look at this!" Everyone ran to him. On the floor, one map. It was old, dirty, as if it had been buried for decades. In the top corner, a strange symbol, like a circle with crossed lines. And below, handwritten in shaky handwriting, "Don't trust the path. Do not trust the path." The map showed a single path, a trail that led straight to the center of Hollow Creek. Monroe took the paper, turning it over in his hands. "Who left this here?" Parker pointed to a nearby tree. "Look, there's more, held in place with a rusty nail, a small piece of fabric, part of a uniform. Next to it, what appeared to be a torn badge." Monroe pulled slowly. Jenkins, the name printed, covered in dried blood. Kepler took a deep breath, trying to remain rational. "We have two options. Stay here waiting for everyone's psychology to implode, or follow this trail and find answers." The group looked at each other. No one wanted to make the first move, but standing there with that feeling of being watched was even worse. V formation, 3 meters apart. Everyone alert for any movement. Anyone who hears, sees, or feels anything out of the ordinary reports it immediately. Understood. Kepler gave the order, and so they started walking. 0450, in the middle of the trail, distortion zone. The walk seemed endless. Monroe's watch showed that only 30 minutes had passed, but it felt like hours. Parker began to bleed from his nose. Ramirez had fits of laughter interspersed with tears. The rest of the team were already showing clear signs of disorientation. It was then that they appeared, the voices, in the distance, as if they were coming from under the earth, calling names, radio orders, cries for help, children's laughter. Kepler stopped walking. Everyone stay still. He closed his eyes, trying to focus, but the voices seemed to be inside each of their heads. Monroe tried using the emergency radio. Nothing. Tried the cell phone on impulse, and only static. It was then that they saw, in the distance, in the middle of the trail, a telephone booth, in the middle of the forest, in nowhere, rusty, covered in moss, but with the phone playing. "This has to be a bad joke," Ramirez muttered. Monroe approached slowly, her heart racing. The phone kept ringing, as if waiting for someone to answer. Kepler shouted, "Nobody touches that! It's provocation!" But Monroe already had his hand on the doorknob. He answered. On the other end of the line, only silence. Then a whisper, faint, almost inaudible. "Don't go any deeper, please, come back, before it's too late." It was Tanner's voice. Before Monroe could respond, the phone exploded into black smoke, as if it had burned from the inside. Parker fell to his knees, screaming, "There's someone here! I can see him! I can see him between the trees!" Everyone turned their lanterns on, but again, just emptiness. Kepler pulled Monroe by his vest. "We are being hunted, and every minute we are getting weaker." Monroe, panting, was still staring at the burnt telephone cord. "We can't stop. Not now. If they're still alive, they're waiting for us to keep going." Kepler hesitated, but he knew the lieutenant was right. "Then let's go to the end." The group started walking again, following the trail. But now, the symbols on the trees began to change. Once they were simple markings, now they were faces, carved eyes, as if the forest itself was watching. And for the first time since the beginning, until Kepler, he began to pray softly. 0518, Hollow Creek Center, point of no return. The trail ended abruptly. After almost an hour of walking, or what they thought was an hour, the group reached a circular clearing completely open in the middle of the forest. But there was something deeply wrong about the place. The ground was dry, cracked, as if it had never seen rain. The trees around, all dead, with twisted trunks, as if they had tried to escape from there but were stuck to the ground. And the air had a metallic smell of old blood, burning, and rust. Kepler stopped at the edge of the clearing. "Stay in formation. No one advances alone." But from then on, the radios started to fail completely. The clock displays defroze, all showing Sci-5-18 sharp, as if time had stopped. Monroe looked at Ramirez, who was holding his head in his hands. "Ramirez, are you listening?" Monroe asked. Ramirez looked up, his pupils dilated, his lips trembling. I hear my mother. She's calling me. She died 5 years ago." Parker, who was walking ahead, fell to his knees, pointing to the ground. "Here! There's something here!" Everyone ran to him. There, partially buried, was a portable radio from the missing patrol, still working, but with a broken display, and next to it, a badge, the one of Tanner. Monroe took the badge with shaking hands. They were here. Before they could process it, the radio crackled on its own. "They're watching." The voice, again, seemed to be Tanner's, but with a deep echo, as if it was coming from inside a cave. Kepler pulled everyone closer. "From now on, no one gets separated. Not for a second. We are in a situation of psychological warfare. This here is not a common rescue mission." Monroe swallowed hard. "Kepler, look at this." In the center of the clearing, There was a construction, almost invisible, like a small underground entrance, made of aged concrete, with a steel door, rusty, half open. Above the door, a plaque, barely legible, but which still bore the faded emblem of a federal organization. U.S. government property, restricted access. Kepler stopped. He took a deep breath. What the hell is this? Ramirez, with a lost look, began to laugh. I know this place. I dreamed about it several times, even before coming on this mission, he whispered, his voice trembling. Kepler pulled Ramirez hard. Get a grip. This is just an old bunker. Let's go in, get the men, and get out of here. Monroe opened the door carefully, the rust cracking like a metallic screen. On the other side, a corridor, dark, damp, with hanging wires, and the distant sound of running footsteps, but always too far away to see who it was. The team went down. Every meter inside felt colder than the last. The walls were covered in handprints, scratches, and hastily scrawled phrases, as if someone, or several someones, were trying to leave one last message before going mad. Don't listen to them. Don't follow the lights. If you see yourself, run. Kepler stopped walking. Monroe looked at him. What it was. Kepler pointed to a metal door, half open, with the number So3 written. From within, lights flickered as if they were lanterns or candles. Monroe pulled out his Glock and charged, but when he opened the door, he froze. Wings inside, were they? Tanner, Ruiz, E. Jenkins, sitting on the floor, backs against the wall, dirty, with lost looks, pale, skin as if they had been there for weeks, maybe months. But the most terrifying detail, the three of them wore uniforms identical to those of the rescue team. Same vests, same equipment, same names on the patch. Kepler came in behind, aiming the rifle. Nobody move! Identify yourselves now! Tanner slowly lifted his face, his eyes completely dull. They took too long to come get us, he murmured. Parker began to back away and stumbling. That doesn't make sense. They disappeared. Yesterday, Ruiz began to laugh. A dry laugh without emotion. Yesterday, for us, it's been years, he said. Jenkins, the rookie, just cried, hugging his knees, repeating, they're coming, they're already in here. Monroe looked at Kepler. Sergeant, we have to get them out of here, now. Kepler hesitated. Something inside him screamed that this was a trap, but there was no time to think. Everyone stand up. In formation. Let's get out of here. The three missing officers stood up with slow, uncoordinated movements, as if their muscles were not responding properly. As the group organized itself, the bunker lights began to flicker, and before they could take the first step back towards the exit, the voices returned, now no longer on the radio, inside the walls, inside each of their heads, and with a unison phrase, repeated by dozens, perhaps hundreds, of overlapping voices. Nobody leaves. 05 to 18, Hollow Creek basement. Lower level Kepler was the first to shout, "Movement! Everyone out of here, now!" The entire group sprinted toward the exit stairs. Their boots thudded against the metal floor, their screams echoing through the halls like a desperate choir. But there was a problem. No matter how much they ran, climbed, and turned the same corridors, they never made it back to the exit door. It was like the bunker, changed shape every minute. The corridors seemed to multiply, lengthen, close behind them. The door that should have led back to the clearing no longer existed. Parker was the first to notice. "Sergeant, we're going around in circles. This wall, I've already marked it with my pocket knife. Twice," he shouted, pointing to a scratch on the rusty metalwork. Kepler leaned his head against the wall, breathing heavily. Sweat ran down his face. Ramirez, on the other hand, began to laugh non-stop, as if the situation were a macabre joke. "This is a maze, a living, bloody maze," Monroe screamed, kicking the wall hard. Suddenly, the lights flickered again, and at that moment, when they returned, Jenkins is gone. Simple as that. In a second, he was right behind Ramirez, crying, breathing, real. The next second, there was only emptiness. "Jenkins!" Monroe yelled. Kepler turned his body, staring into the darkness. "Don't separate, no matter what happens." But the warning came too late. Monroe's radio crackled again. A voice, low, drawn out, as if coming from a place very far away. "Do you see me? I'm right here behind you." Monroe turned his body with everything, the gun already in position. Nothing. Kepler grabbed the lieutenant by the shoulder. "Keep your head, Monroe. It's not real. It's the bunker. It's this place." But the problem was that it was starting to look very real. Parker, who had been silent until then, fell to his knees. He began banging his head against the wall, hard, as if he wanted to erase something inside his own mind. "They're calling me. They're calling me. They're calling me," he repeated. Ramirez tried to pull him away, but Parker let go, and before anyone could stop him, he ran alone down one of the side corridors, disappearing into the darkness. Kepler closed his eyes for a second. 2 men missing in less than a minute. Monroe no longer knew what was real. "Kepler, what are you telling me this is? An experiment? A weapon? A distortion field? What is this?" The sergeant simply replied in a dry voice, "I don't know, but if we stop to try to understand, we'll end up like them." It was then that Ruiz, who had been silent until then, pointed to the end of the corridor. "Look," he whispered. The lanterns illuminated. A new door, big, reinforced, different from the others. Above it, a metal plaque with the words, "Exit, a way out." Kepler didn't think twice. "Let's go, now." The group advanced, running, but as they got closer, they noticed something that made their blood run cold. The door had fingernail marks, deep scratches, as if dozens of people had tried to leave without being able to. Monroe hesitated. "Kepler, this could be another trap." The sergeant looked at him with a look that mixed despair and survival. "Everything here is a trap, but it's better to die trying to get out than to stay here waiting to go crazy." Kepler gripped the doorknob tightly and pulled. The door opened with a creak that seemed to echo for miles. On the other side, a corridor, long, lit by a pale, almost bluish light. But unlike the previous corridors, this one seemed static. It didn't vibrate. It didn't change shape. It was as if it was the only piece of solid reality within that hell. "Come on, move!" Kepler shouted. The group entered. They walked for minutes until they reached an open room with a high ceiling, hanging cables, and a huge control panel turned off with broken monitors, papers scattered, as if an evacuation had happened years ago. But the detail that caught our attention the most was on the floor. Bodies, dozens, everyone, using police uniforms from different counties in California. Some with identification of sheriffs who disappeared decades ago. Others with dates of missions that never happened. Monroe knelt down, picking up a badge from the floor. "This here is Sergeant Heller. He disappeared in 1998. I remember that case. It was in the Academy archives." Kepler looked around, his stomach churning. "This here is a cemetery." Ruiz walked away, tripping over another body, and then he pointed. In the corner of the room, there was a surveillance camera still on, with the recording light blinking. Monroe ran to her, rummaged through the equipment, found a powered terminal. He called. On the screen, a video on loop, showing a recording from a few minutes ago. The video showed themselves entering the bunker, the group, exactly as they were dressed at that moment. But behind them, in the shadows, several figures in SWAT uniforms, but with their faces completely erased, as if they were duplicates, faceless, following them discreetly. Kepler froze when he saw the recording. That doesn't make sense. Before they could turn off the terminal, the screen went black, and the entire room was plunged into darkness. For a moment, absolute silence. And then the broken monitors began to turn on, one by one, displaying each team member's face in black and white, looking directly at the camera, even though no one else had done so. Kepler pointed the gun at his own shadow. "We are in a cycle, a cycle of repetition. Monroe felt his stomach turn. What if we've already been here before? What if we're already dead? Kepler took a deep breath, and before he could respond, a new siren sounded inside the bunker. Red lights started flashing, and on the sound system, an automated voice began to repeat, "Initiating containment protocol. Initiating containment protocol. Critical level. Full lockdown in 5 minutes." Monroe and Kepler looked at each other. "Is this the end?" Monroe asked. Kepler loaded the rifle with the look of someone who has already lost everything except the will to fight. "No, not yet. 0518, Hollow Creek Bunker, Containment Sector." The siren throbbed on the ceiling like a warning of the end of the world. The red lights flashed in a rhythmic rhythm, illuminating sweaty faces, wide eyes, and weapons shaking in hands. "Initiating containment protocol, 4 minutes remaining." The sound system repeated like a death sentence. Kepler was breathing with difficulty. His lungs seemed to burn, the air already thin inside that damn place. "Listen," he shouted. "Everyone listen to me. We have little time. This containment system, it's not for holding someone. It's for hold something." Monroe had his hands resting on a broken control panel. "And guess what? We're inside with her." Ramirez leaned against the wall, his hands shaking. "Please, tell me there is another way out." It was then that Ruiz, still pale, pointed to a steel side door with faded olive green paint. "Here, there's something written," he shouted. Monroe ran to the door. A rusty sign read, "Emergency tunnel access, lower levels." Kepler quickly read the panel next to the door. An old, hand-drawn map of the bunker showed that the lower tunnels had been used as escape routes during the Cold War. But there was a note written in red, like a hastily scribbled note. "Do not go down. The lower levels don't let you leave." Kepler swore under his breath. "So we have 2 options. Wait for the bunker to close and hope to get out alive, or go down to hell and try our luck." Monroe had already made his decision. "Between dying here or down there trying, I choose to try." Ramirez looked at Kepler with tears streaming down his face. "We're not leaving here, you know that." Kepler pulled the magazine, cocking it once more. "I know, but at least, let's go down shooting." 3 minutes left. The group got into position. Monroe turned the doorknob. The door creaked, releasing ancient dust. The smell of mold, damp earth, and something else, fermented, rotten, and rose from the depths. Descending the stairs, the air grew thicker and thicker. The walls grew thinner, as if the tunnel itself were breathing. With each step, the ground seemed further away. The voices returned, but now not just as whispers. They were screams of agony, as if hundreds of people were trapped below, all screaming at the same time. Kepler led the line, rifle ready. Ruiz, right behind, began to look at his own arms, as if the skin was moving on its own. "Sergeant, I'm seeing things," Ruiz murmured. Kepler turned, facing him. "That's the bunker messing with your head. Focus!" But before Ruiz could respond, the wall next to him began to bleed. Yes, blood, dripping down through the cracks, forming a red thread that slowly descended to the ground. Ramirez shouted, "This isn't psychological. This is happening." Monroe grabbed Ruiz by the collar, dragging him down the stairs. With every meter, the feeling that something followed right behind them, stepping on false ground, as if my legs didn't work properly. They arrived at the lowest level. The tunnel opened into a circular hall with a metal well in the center, protected by bars. From inside came the most disturbing sound they had ever heard. It was a mix of voices, all speaking at the same time, all in different languages, but with one phrase repeated in English, on a loop, in various intonations, in male voices, female voices, children's voices. "You never left. You guys never left." Kepler pointed the flashlight down the well, but it was impossible to see the end. And then, without warning, Ruiz was pulled. As if an invisible hook had grabbed him by the ankle, he was dragged towards the well, screaming. with nails tearing the ground, but with no chance of resistance. Kepler and Monroe rushed to hold him back, but the moment Ruiz crossed the bars, he disappeared. No sound, no echo, no feedback. Ramirez fell to the ground, screaming, his mind shattered once and for all. 2 minutes left. Kepler turned to Monroe with a look that was a mixture of fear and anger. "We can't go on. Let's go back." But when they tried to climb back up the stairs, they came face to face with a concrete wall where the tunnel used to be, as if the bunker itself had changed shape. Again, Monroe leaned his head against the concrete in disbelief. "We are being moved like pieces on a board," he whispered. The lights in the tunnel began to flicker, and that's when they saw it, the figures walking down the hall, wearing SWAT uniforms, but with distorted faces, without eyes, without mouth, just black holes instead of features. They were copies, echoes, deformations of themselves. Kepler aimed the rifle. "Monroe, around the next bend. Run. And you." Kepler smiled, a sad smile, like that of a man who has already accepted his fate. "I'll hold them." Before Monroe could protest, Kepler opened fire. The sound of gunshots echoed through the corridors, mixed with the inhuman screams coming from the copies. Monroe ran like never before. He passed through doors, through corridors, through staircases that seemed to spiral. The walls changed color, texture, shape. When he finally passed through one last metal door, the world went white, an absolute flash, followed by darkness. A 518, location unknown. Monroe opened his eyes with difficulty. The light was pale, almost blue, as if he were underwater. The air freezing. The ground stone cold. He tried to get up, but his body felt heavier than normal, his joints stiff, as if he had been asleep for days or months. All around, absolute silence. No sign of Kepler, none of the others, no echo of gunshots, screams, nothing. He was in a hallway, but it wasn't the same as before. The walls, smooth, no rust, no cracks, no hanging wires. The place looked like new, as if the bunker had just been built. Monroe took a deep breath. "Kepler, Ramirez, Parker." He called. His voice sounded muffled, like he was shouting into a pillow. Advancing down the corridor, he noticed a steel door at the end. Above it, an illuminated sign. "Exit, surface level." Monroe hesitated. "It can't be that easy," he murmured. But still, he walked to the door and opened it. On the other side, the outside world, the forest, Hollow Creek, with the sun rising behind the trees, birds singing, the wind rustling the leaves, as if everything was exactly the same as before. He walked towards the road, and then he saw the vehicles. They were there, parked, immobile, their paintwork glistening in the morning dew. Monroe ran. He reached the first. Inside it, Kepler, sitting in the driver's seat, with eyes open, with his gaze fixed on the horizon, but without any expression. "Kepler!" Monroe knocked on the glass. Nothing. He opened the door with force. The sergeant did not react. Monroe felt the pulse, normal heartbeat, but Kepler seemed in a trance, as if his brain had been turned off, but his body was still functioning. Monroe looked around. In the other vehicles were Ramirez, Parker, and even Jenkins, all in the same state, eyes open, but like wax dolls. He ran to the patrol car's radio. He called. Working. It turned to the central frequency. "This is Lieutenant Monroe, Los Angeles County SWAT. I need immediate assistance in the Hollow Creek area. Team located, but showing signs of neurological collapse. Repeat. Urgent assistance." On the other end of the line, a voice answered, but it wasn't from the central. It was Kepler's voice. "You never left, Monroe." Monroe froze. He looked at the driver's seat, and Kepler was still there, motionless, but the voice was Dell. Before I could react, all the radios in the vehicles turned on at the same time. "Nobody left. Nobody ever leaves. You're still here." The ground shook. Monroe turned his body, looking at the forest. But something was wrong. The sun, which had risen a few minutes ago, started to go down again. as if time were coming back. The trees began to die in accelerated time, the leaves falling, the trunks rotting, all before his eyes. The sky darkened, the clouds closed in, the air became heavy, toxic. Monroe ran into the road. It ran like never before, but with every kilometer, I realized that the road repeated itself. It went through the same curves, the same rocks, the same fallen tree, again and again. He stopped, panting. He looked back. The vehicles, again, at the end of the road, exactly as they were minutes ago, as if I had never left there. The radio in his vest beeped. This time, it was Parker's voice. "Are you listening to me, Lieutenant? Are you listening to me? We are waiting for you to start the search. It is already 5:18 a.m. We are ready to enter the forest." Monroe froze. 05:18. He looked at his watch. 05:18. Same time. Again. Always the same. He fell to his knees on the asphalt. The voices began to echo inside his head. "You never left. You're still there. It always has been." The horizon began to distort. The trees began to multiply, as if the entire forest was folding in on itself. And then, for the first time, Monroe saw, from afar, at the end of the road, standing, watching, a man, wearing exactly the same uniform as him, same uniform, same insignia, same face, as if it were a copy. The copy raised his hand, as if to wave, but instead of eyes, there were just two black holes. And then the cycle began again. Monroe felt her body being pulled back, the sound of sirens in the distance, Kepler's voice calling the team to formation. Again, everything, again, as if time, space, consciousness were just layers of an invisible prison. 05:18, again. The familiar sound of the emergency siren cut through the morning air. The car radio was crackling. Kepler, Ramirez, Parker, all in the same place. Just like the last. How many times? 10, 100, 1,000. Monroe didn't know anymore. He was there, again, standing next to the vehicle, just like at the beginning of the mission. But this time, something inside him changed. He knew it wasn't real. It couldn't be. The voices, the loop, the bunker, the forest, the road, all. A repetition controlled by something he could not understand. The sound of the radio broke the silence. "Lieutenant Monroe, everyone ready to enter the forest. Your authorization." He closed his eyes. His heart was beating wildly. "No," he whispered. He picked up the pistol. He locked the magazine. "Repeat, sir? We're not going into the forest," he said more firmly. The other team members looked at each other, as if an invisible script had been broken. Kepler, for the first time, turned his face away. "What's up?" he asked, with an expression that mixed confusion and fear. Monroe climbed onto the hood of the police car, taking a deep breath. "Listen carefully. We never left this place. Everything you are seeing, hearing, feeling is a repetition, a cycle, a trap." Parker stepped forward. "Lieutenant, are you okay?" Monroe turned the pistol and, without hesitation, he shot himself in the foot. The shot echoed down the road. The pain, real, suffocating, hot. He fell to the ground, screaming. But looking at the foot, the wound was gone in seconds. The hole in the boot closed itself. The skin repaired itself, as if the shot had never happened. Kepler took a step back, his gaze lost. That's impossible." Monroe laughed, a laugh mixed with despair and relief. "Exactly." He got up, limping, but with his mind clearer than ever. "We only have one way out." Ramirez was shaking. "Which?" Monroe looked to the horizon, where the road curved, leading back into the forest. "Break the cycle. Do something. That's not in the script." Kepler stared at him. "And what exactly do you have in mind?" Monroe pointed to the patrol car. "Accelerate this damn thing to the limit. And let's go straight off this damn road. Let's go off route, off path, off sequence." Parker hesitated. "What if that's what they want?" Monroe stared at Parker. "Then let them come, but we won't play by their rules anymore." The team boarded. Monroe took the wheel. The engine roared. He stepped on the gas. The vehicle picked up speed, cutting across the road like lightning. Kepler, in the back seat, held his rifle tightly. Ramirez prayed softly. Parker cried. Little by little, the road began to distort. The trees turned into blurred shapes. The sky turned red, then purple, then absolute black. The speedometer was spinning out of control, and then the impact. The sensation of collision was brutal. Twisted metal, shattered glass, screams, 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 and then silence. When Monroe opened his eyes, he was sitting in an iron chair in the middle of a white room with no doors, with no windows. On the other side, a table, and behind her, Kepler. But this Kepler wasn't wearing a uniform. He wore a black suit. His gaze was cold, without any sign of humanity. "Welcome, Lieutenant." Kepler's voice was calm, controlled, almost mechanical. Monroe tried to get up, but he was trapped. Invisible chains. "Where am I?" he asked. Kepler smiled. "Where you've always been." Suddenly, on the walls, images began to project themselves. Monroe entering the bunker. Monroe waking up on the road. Monroe talking to the men on the team. Monroe shooting himself in the foot. Monroe driving. Monroe waking up again and again. You are just a fragment, a projection of a cycle that began years ago when the first team entered that bunker. Monroe shouted, "So, I'm not real?" Kepler tilted his head. "Define real. Memory, pain, fear. You feel all of these, don't you?" The room began to shrink, the walls closing in. Kepler, or whatever he was, stood up, walked over to Monroe and whispered in his ear, "Now, everything will start again." And before Monroe could react, light, sirens, radio hissing, Kepler shouting, "Team, formation, time to enter." The forest, 0518. And there was Monroe, again standing next to the patrol car, with the Hollow Creek forest in front of him, taken, repeating, and knowing, for the first time, that I would never leave there. Never. And there. After all this, answer me one thing in the comments. Do you think Monroe will ever be able to break out of this cycle? Or is he, and everyone else, doomed to repeat this nightmare forever? Leave your theory below. I want to know. What do you think really happened in that forest? Was it an experiment, a supernatural phenomenon, or something even worse that we can't even understand? If this video has kept you hooked this far, leave a like, because it shows YouTube that you like this type of story. And if you are not registered yet, join Conflict Route now, because here, the next stories will be even more disturbing. See you on the next case, if you're still around.